Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias, bonjour. I'm used to speaking in a few languages as my sport that I work in kind of leads to that. I understand as well, even among this group, que tenemos un grupo latino que trabaja en esta industria. Y hoy estamos hablando del fútbol, el fútbol verdadero, no el fútbol americano. Y también, and I understand also, il y a des coéquipiers québécois aujourd'hui ici, canadiens. Ouais, bon matin. Je voudrais parler avec des habitants, mais cette année, c'est pas bon. Alors, c'est mieux que je commence mon présentation. I'd like to start the presentation. Obviously, when I first talked to Kevin, and thank you very much, Kevin, for this opportunity, and I thank the board of directors for having this opportunity. It's a little different for me to speak to an audience. I know we're all sports fans, whatever sport that we choose. But I had an opportunity to also look at a lot of the literature and sort of your industry, and it was remarkably striking to me how similar it is to what I do. I deal with various stakeholders, similar to what you deal with. You deal with labor management and ownership. I have to deal with players, owners, national federations, governments. And so at the end of the day, we have to define what really our roadmap to victory is. And so when I spoke to Kevin, we decided that the title of this sort of discussion would be the roadmap to victory, how top-performing teams and organizations build a new culture and a positive culture and a path forward through solid leadership and corporate governance. Now, the reality is that victory is defined differently by every organization. And for us, and for my sport, and just hearing what I've heard this morning, I think one of the most important features in what we have defined as victory is unity. And where there's unity, there is always victory. The other flip side of this conversation, and when I spoke to Kevin, the first title we actually came up with was, "Don't Let a Crisis Go to Waste." And the reason we spoke about that is because in my sport, we have had one hell of a crisis over the last few years. And quite frankly, the reason that I'm up here standing as the president of CONCACAF and the vice president of FIFA is because that crisis occurred. The three previous presidents of my organization, two of them are in jail, and one is indicted and about to go to jail. So if you want crisis, that's crisis. I was probably put into this position because I'm probably a nice Canadian boy, but I like to think I was also put in there because I have a little bit of ability. And I think one of the key things, and as I said to you earlier, looking at the work that you do where you're bringing in your sort of tripartite sectors of your industry, using education, which is heartwarming when I see that actually, leadership, lobbying, marketing, all very similar components to what we do to provide the stakeholders in our game. Our crisis was beyond just having our presidents indicted. We had significant corruption in our organization. We had a staff that was absolutely devastated morally. We had banks that didn't want to deal with us. We had accounting firms that didn't want to do auditing for us. So when I say crisis, I mean crisis. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was only 20 months ago. And to give you the scope of what CONCACAF is, it covers 41 countries. From Canada, the true north, as I like to call it, all the way down to actually the South American continent, Suriname, Guyana, and French Guyana. So when you're talking about culture and a cultural change, not only are you dealing with the organizational change that we talk about in a corporate setting, as we talked about, perhaps you've talked about over the last few days, in an industry setting, but you're also talking about various cultures and how people do business differently. So how did we manage in 20 months to turn around an organization where institutions are lining up to do business with us, where the staff culture is at an all-time high, where we've completely changed the dynamics, where now when people report on our organization, they talk about our core business, which is football. And I'll say football because it's tough for me to say soccer. So when I talk about football, I'm talking about Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, not about Tom Brady and Fly, Eagles, Fly. So congratulations for those of you from Philadelphia. I'm a Cowboy fan, sorry. Yeah, I know, I hear you. Listen, it's been too long. Anyway, I digress. Talk about crisis. That's another story for another day. The vision that we put out as our organization to start the journey, because I think before you establish what are the key ingredients in your organization for a roadmap to success, and in our case, the roadmap to success needed to end up in unity of the 41 member federations and everything inside those 41 organizations, was to create a vision. And what we created was a vision called One CONCACAF. And what that meant is 41 countries aggregating their assets from a governance perspective, from an economics perspective, obviously from a sporting perspective, to come together and provide not only an internal vision, but also external. Because as we know, it's how the world sees us as well. And it's no different in any other industry. It's how the world sees you as well. And how we established this, we provided 12 key ingredients that we built this platform on. And they're very simple. However, I think one of the things that will underpin this will be right at the end. But I think before I go on, I also wanted to point out, and I think Kevin will outline how we do this, but I also wanted to acknowledge, I come from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. There's a good friend in the audience here, Mr. Eric Bone. I'd like to salute. This year marks the 60th anniversary of a tragic accident on one of our bridges where some ironworkers unfortunately fell to their death. And so at the end of my presentation, I have a special presentation for the membership here on behalf of myself and on behalf of our soccer club in Vancouver, the Vancouver Whitecaps, who play in Major League Soccer, to honor the ironworkers. And we'll get to that at the end. Getting back to our 12 key ingredients for an organization to set a cultural change so that we have this roadmap. The first one is to establish and set your goals. Establish a shared vision for all. A clear vision gives us purpose to your organization and creates a specific focus in helping establish your strategic plan. But what's important as well is what I call the in-betweens. We all have mission statements, we all have vision statements, but what's important is that those don't be put on a wall and they don't be put on the shelf. It's important that those must be lived by the organization and the people within the organization. There must be a total commitment to the plan and to the team. You must think big, because a strong vision inspires the commitment and the dedication of your team. You must also think often. And what that means is you often refer to those goals and that strategy, because that keeps your team sharp in your objectives in everybody's mind. The second foundation was a proper constitutional framework, or in your case, it would be policies and processes. I heard in the earlier presentation about, obviously, safety and what is important. Obviously, if you don't have really defined policies and processes, and I know those are not the sexy things about doing your job and going to work, but they are so imperative, and those must be refreshed and renewed, because any constitutional framework, any statutory framework, any policies and processes must be organic. And if they're not reviewed consistently on a consistent basis, it's very difficult for people to work in that environment, regardless of your organization. The third, which a lot of people take for granted, is in my sport, we call it work rate. And on the pitch, it's easy. You have players that fluff off and other players that work hard. But even in an organization, it's important that you don't take a day off. And I don't mean calling sick, I mean mentally. And why this is important is because in order to institute cultural change, you as an individual, not just the president of an organization or the general secretary, but you as an individual must become a champion of change. Individual and team discipline is key and must be followed. And this is why every member of your team plays a significant role towards steering your organization to the end goal, which is the unity. As they said, a good man or a good woman has never drowned in their own sweat. And so it's something I think that as an organization, you must embrace. The fourth element that we built on, in our sport, it's called fair play, but it's really respect. Attitude in life, as we know, determines everything. Fair play is a complex concept, however. It compromises fundamental values that we know of that are integral to everyday life. Fair competition, respect, friendship, team spirit, equality. But the one thing you must not do is fear responsibility as an individual and as a group. The fifth element that we built on, which is very important as well, is enjoyment. Joy must be found in everything that you do as an organization and people within it. It's important, and this is very important for our organization, and actually I saw it in some of the videos as well, is laughter. Laughter is a key component to an organization, and that's not about telling jokes only, although that's not bad if you can do that. But having laughter, there's nothing more human than enjoying a good laugh with someone. And I think if you can sprinkle that component into an organization and create an atmosphere where individuals are very happy to be in that environment, it goes a long way in creating your goal. Obviously, you need to balance that enthusiasm. You can't have a workplace or an organization that is a comedy shop, but in the same token, I think it's very important to balance that seriousness in what you do with the element of joy. The sixth element and pillar that we sort of built our cultural change on was a positive attitude. And what was important there was, again, it always goes down to the individual. And the individual must choose his or her own atmosphere that exists. You need to, as an organization, avoid what I call bad carriers, people that have a negative influence in the environment. And by doing that, you always have to enhance what we call the good qualities and the good behavior. And you have to also look in the mirror and make sure that you are not, and you don't lead the negativity in your organization. And at times, you have to have that chat with yourself, because if you feel that you're like that, then you should really question what you're doing and how you're doing it. These are serious questions that have to be asked in order to go from where we went to in a crisis when you walked into the door to where we are now. Some of them are not what I would call easy questions to ask to your staff, to your stakeholders, to yourself. But in order to get to the destination that you need to, there are questions that must be asked and must be answered. The seventh pillar that we built upon was adaptability. And every organization has to have a high adaptability, because high adaptability equals a greater chance of success. And in our case, adaptability was the ability to embrace change. and to be open to new opportunities and to new ways to grow. My previous speaker, by the way, excellent job, it was very informative, spoke about coming back after he was overseas and how things had changed, and he had to adapt his business. That's no different in any organization, whether it's yours, whether it's mine as a sporting organization. At CONCACAF, we recognized the need to change and focused on our main product, which is football. And one of the ways we changed our culture was not just by the big buzzwords or speaking, was what I call the breaking bread theory, which is the one-on-one discussions. I heard Kevin earlier say, don't be shy and mingle. The value of that for an organization, especially in my case and in my organization, was massive. It requires a big commitment, but I had partners and sponsors. I'll give you an example. I had a television sponsor, one of the big Mexican TV companies that will remain nameless for now, who was our partner for 35 years. And I chose to go visit them at their location in Mexico City. And as I walked in the door, their CEO said to me, owner of the company actually, said to me, you're the first president that's ever walked through this door in 35 years. In 35 years. And so don't take things for granted. Don't ever assume that things are always on the up and up with your stakeholders. Take the opportunity. As I say, break bread with them. Have a coffee, whatever it is. Those little things seem very simple, but those little things will change the culture of your organization. Because at the end of the day, whether it's my industry or your industry, whether it's tools and all the things that we do and all the things that we build, it's always about the human element. And at the end of the day, as we saw by the guy that retired, guys are slapping his back, guys were shaking his hand. At the end of the day, it's all about that. It's all about the human aspect and the human connection. And that's what really makes your organization grow. It's not just the tools, it's not, those are just things that we use. The other thing I think we need to do is recognize and display empathy in our organization. And again, reading through some of your literature, talked about diversity. Excellent. And I salute you, Kevin, and your team for taking on that challenge. I think it's a challenge worldwide in every industry. Because I think one of the mottos that we like to live by in my organization is that people don't care that you know if they don't know that you care. And I think that for an organization will stead you very well and lead you in the right direction if people know that about you and your organization. The eighth component is what we call competitiveness, which requires a high level of coordination, competitiveness. Everybody competes, whether you're competing for jobs, whether you're competing, obviously, for some of the projects. In my case, you're not only competing on the field, but you're competing off the field for partners and sponsors and stuff like that. In your organization, when you're in a competitive environment, you will require what we call fighters or soldiers, people that truly believe. And I'm not sure you're really going to have a problem in your industry, because from some of the guys I saw in that video, I'd go to war with some of those guys, that's for sure. So I don't think you're ever going to have a problem in your organization. However, what I mean by that is, I honestly believe you can tell when you look in somebody's eyes if they're really in it and really there for what they need to be there. And I think organizations will only be better where you have that identity, where you have people that are willing to fight for your cause. You have to create a will to succeed as an organization. Keeping in mind, you also have to institute what we call rebounding techniques, because life is not always about success. Life is about failures and how you respond in failures. And so your organization has to be tooled for that, tooled for rebounding in situations where there is failures. And that all comes from a personal commitment of every individual, not only at the top, but at the bottom. So I'll tell you a little story here. When NASA first put the man on the moon back before I was born, in the early 60s, I think, I got that right. They actually did an audit of all their staff in terms of their job description and what they do. And so they interviewed a young lady who happened to be, for lack of a better definition, a janitor. Clean the washrooms and clean the hallways. And they asked her, "What do you do here? What is your job?" And her answer was, "My job is to put a man on the moon." So the cultural environment at NASA at that time was not only the guy in the rocket ship or whatever that's called, or the guy in the control booth, or all the engineers and scientists, but it permeated right down to the person that was just cleaning the halls, who understood her role in the organization, that it was her role to also put the man on the moon. She had buy-in. Now that's an ultimate success story, but it's also a success story that as an organization, I think you need to strive for. The ninth pillar that we built upon, which obviously is very important, we're all here talking, and which is all great, and we have speakers throughout the day, but is communication. But I think one of the most important things of communication is listening. As my dad said to me, you have two of these and one of these, use them proportionally. Listening is a very valuable process in your organization. As I said, constantly communicating your mission and your values can't be understated. Need to focus on the do, not on the not to do. Need to avoid misinformation. It absolutely debilitates an organization. And you must be clear and candid in your communication to not only your internal stakeholders, but your external stakeholders. The 10th element that we built upon was what we call team pride. Establishing a culture that is team first, creating a feeling of belonging and succeeding as a team. Obviously, that goes without saying, especially in the capacity of your industry when we deal with safety. God forbid if the team atmosphere did not exist. As it was said earlier, I also have a background in risk management and insurance, so I have the pleasure of dealing with not only your industry, but other facets of the construction industry. And obviously, that's a key component to ensuring that, as I said, people walk off the job properly. The 11th component that we built was building and inscribing some confidence in the organization and in our individuals. Having optimism. At the end of the day, people always want hope. When people lose hope, people lose everything. So it's important in your organization that you provide very positive feedback to individuals, to the group. You communicate appreciation, and you consistently set your targets and reset your targets. And of course, the 12th pillar, which really is not even a pillar, I call it an underpinning. See, I'm learning about construction here in a very short time. Because what underpins all of this is leadership. With CONCACAF, we created a vision, but it was a leadership of every individual in our organization that influenced everyone else in the team. Sort of like a spider web. If you lose one string in the spider web is done. We had full engagement and commitment to driving the success. The candor was set at the top by myself, and it was set with my tone, establishing authority which reduced uncertainty in the organization. Because it's very important that leadership is about service. It is not about power. As leaders, we understand that organizations are in constant evolution, and we must prepare to sustain this change, to enable the continuous growth of your organization. Because in the end, where there is unity, there is victory. Thank you very much. And, oh, go back to the...
Ornamental ironwork is a big, profitable business.
Sorry about that. I wanted to speak about my little gift to your group here, if that's okay. Melissa, can you put up the last screen there? As I said to you earlier, the Vancouver Whitecaps Football Club, who play in the MLS, unveiled the other day a new Unity jersey. And it is it's in honor of the iron workers, and in honor of how iron workers build communities, string communities together, connect communities with all the work they do. And it's also in honor of the 60-year anniversary of the tragedy in our city. And so I like to say that I coaxed them into doing this because I was speaking today about unity and unity as victory. But I think it's a bit of karma that the city that I come from, that Mr. Bone comes from as well, has a jersey that they're going to use this year called the Unity jersey in honor of the ironworkers. And so I would like to, and I don't know how Kevin's going to do it, I'll let him figure it out, but I'm offering a jersey to a winner of a draw or whatever you're going to do, or sing off, or I don't know what you're going to do, dance off or something. And so Kevin will let me know who the winner is, and then I will proudly send that jersey to you, which is a Vancouver Whitecaps Unity jersey honoring ironworkers. Thank you.